Here we go. 2 Timothy chapter 2, 1 through 7. It says, "You therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus, and the things that ye have heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. You therefore must endure hardship as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. No one engaged in warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who enlisted him as a soldier. And also, if anyone competes in athletics, he is not crowned unless he competes according to the rules. The hard-working farmer must be first to partake of the crops. Consider what I say, and may the Lord give you understanding in all things." All right, that makes a whole lot more sense here this morning. I'd like to ask you just a few questions to kind of get us started in our message this morning. Let me ask you this. When you got saved, when you accepted Jesus Christ as your Savior, how come God did not just rapture you out at that point and take you on to be in heaven with Him? Why does God leave us here? Okay, proclaim His Word. Who to? Okay, everyone or others, right? Okay. Now, granted, it would kind of hinder evangelism if people did get raptured the moment they got, or they died or something right after they got saved. So we don't want that to happen. But God leaves us here to have a ministry to others. Okay, others. Now, let me ask you this question. Okay, I hope every hand goes up. But how many of you here want to be successful in your Christian life? Okay. All right, there we go. Good. I'm happy most hands went up there. How many of you want to be a better, stronger Christian than you were, let's say a week ago? Okay. I think most hands goes up. Okay. I saw Josie thinking about that one. She said, let's see, a week ago. Okay, I think I can pull that off. All right. How many of you want to be a stronger influence for Christ this year than, let's say, you were last year? Okay. I think everybody would agree with that. How many of you want Clare Creek to be a thriving church in our community where lives are changed and people are coming to Christ on a regular basis? Right? I think everybody wants to do that. All right, now here's the real question. Are you willing to make the changes necessary in order to grow personally and to grow as a church? And you don't have to answer that one out loud, okay? Because I want you to think about that as we go through the message today. Are we really willing to make the changes necessary to make that happen? If there was ever a time for leadership in the church, it is for now. And I'm going to challenge you this morning as your pastor that it is time for leadership to rise up in this church. I'm going to preach a little bit differently than I normally would. Normally we go verse by verse, take a lot of text, do a lot of applying. But I want to give you some things that I learned several years ago at a conference that I went to, but I feel like it would be helpful for us as a church today. I do want to go through the text real quick again and just point out some things rapidly that Paul talks about here, writing to this young preacher, this young Timothy. He says, "The things that you have heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." And Sheila hit the nail on the head right there. God has taught us things. People have taught us things in our lives so that we can teach them to others who will then teach them to others. Okay? That's discipleship. That's the whole plan of the church. That's the whole plan of the gospel. Okay? That we tell people what we learned, what God has given to us, and then they in turn teach it to others. Okay? Another rhetorical question real quick. How many people have you told the things you learned about God last week? How many have you told this week those things that you learned? Okay? Or did you learn anything last week about God? And I'm not talking about from our message. I'm talking about in your personal Bible study. Where did you grow last week that you've shared with someone else? Okay? You can see this could get real convicting pretty easy. Look at verse 3. He says, "You therefore must endure hardship as a good soldier of Jesus Christ." In other words, this is not an easy road. Okay? There's some hardship that comes along the way. It's tough sometimes. It's difficult, okay? The things that you've learned trying to teach them to other people are not always received well, are they? Okay? Sometimes people don't want to listen to the message that you have. And so there's some, but as a good soldier of Jesus Christ, you hang in there. In verse 4, he says, "No one entangled in warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life." In other words, since we're involved in this battle, in this war, we don't have time for all the things that this life has to offer us. We do that so that we may please Him who enlisted him as a soldier. Who enlisted you as a soldier? Jesus Christ did, right? As we're soldiers of the cross, okay? Now you have been enlisted into this battle to fight the fight effectively. And so it's going to take some focus. Then verse 5, he says this. He says, "And also if anyone competes in athletics, he is not crowned unless he competes according to the rules. I love this verse. In other words, you can't cheat. Okay? You can't cheat. There's rules to the game. There's rules to the warfare. And you can't just take off and do your own thing. There's some things you have to follow here. Okay? No shortcuts. You've got to work hard and you've got to play by the rules. Then in verse 6, he says, the hardworking farmer must be first to partake of the crops. And his point being there is that you can't give something that you have not accomplished yourself. In other words, the farmer grows the food, he eats the food. After he's received it, he says, now I can give out the rest of it to everybody else, okay? But if he never grows the crops, he can't give the crops away, all right? So you can't give something that you don't have. Now, taking all of that and applying to the church, I want to say first of all this morning that everyone in this room today is a leader, okay? You are a leader of some type. You are a minister. You are an example to someone. It may be to your grandchildren. It may be your children. It may be to the younger men of this church, the younger women of this church, to the teens, to the other children in the Sunday school class. You teenagers are examples and leaders to the younger people, younger kids in this church. But you are an example to someone. Somebody is watching you. This sounded a little bit familiar from our Sunday school lesson this morning, right? Somebody's watching you. What are you passing down to them? And the big question is, are you a good leader or are you a bad leader? And in order to be a good leader, it's going to require some things. So this morning I'm going to give you some, what I would call 10 steps necessary to be a good leader. If Timothy was to be a good leader in this church that God put him into, okay, he was going to have to do some things, practical things in his Christian life to help him be the kind of leader that he needed to be to honor God. And the first thing that I want you to notice here is that you have to choose to grow, okay? When Paul gave Timothy this message, Timothy could have taken this letter and said, that Paul, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's so old school. He doesn't know all the new methods. He doesn't know the way to do things anymore. He hasn't been to the latest seminar. He hasn't been to the latest class. That old Paul guy, he's kind of, he's an old generation, There's a generation gap here. And Timothy could have done his own thing. But Timothy, in being wise, would have taken Paul's advice and done the things that he commanded him to do. Let me ask you a question this morning. What is growth? What is growth? When you think of growth, what do you think of? Let's play talk and answer here. Okay, go ahead. Elijah, what do you think of when you think of growth? Something gets bigger. Okay. Lyra, what do you think? Okay, so give me a second. Okay. I love it how our kids are quick to answer and all the adults are going, I don't want to answer this. It's kind of a trick question. He's setting me up here. Okay. Anthony, what do you think growth is? Okay, you got a seed. Okay. Now, is that seed? He said, I think. Oh, I think. Oh, okay, you're thinking. Okay. I see the smoke rising out of your ears. I can tell you're thinking here. So, but, let's think about a seed for just a second. What happens to that seed before it grows? Does it stay a seed? No. Oh, what's it do? Changes. I heard somebody say it. It changes, all right? Growth is always change. Okay, now granted, there is sometimes that change does not always mean growth because change can be for the worse. But growth always involves change. John Maxwell said this. I've said the quote 100 times in this church. You've heard it a dozen times, but it's one of my favorite quotes. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. Right? Some of you have not grown in your Christian life because you've been doing the same things that you were doing 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, or even 20 years ago. You just haven't made any progress. You see, if you like what you're doing now and you haven't changed in 5 years, then you're not growing. Right? Makes sense? And some of you said, well, I graduated college and I learned it all, so therefore I'm this Christian thing that God has molded, and I'm 23, 24 years old, and you haven't grown since. You've not changed a single thing about your life. You've not learned any new thing. Some preach that leadership is a gift, and I'm not sure I totally 100% agree with that. Some are definitely better at it than others. And I do believe that some have been given the gift of administration, but not necessarily leadership. Growing always means change. How do you know when you're growing? How do you know when your kids are growing? Your kids are growing. You're easy to figure that out, right? Our kids, our son Rick went from a size 8 to a size 12 shoe size in about 6 months. We knew he was growing. He came home from school one day and said, Dad, my shoes are hurting my feet. I said, well, shoes can't be hurting your feet. We just got those 2 months ago. Dad, they really hurt. I said, give me that shoe. Stick your toe up. And his toe's popping out through the end practically. I said, this is crazy. You can't be out of that size 9 already. About 3 weeks later, he said, Dad, these shoes really hurting my feet. I said, son, we just bought you those shoes 3 weeks ago. You haven't even worn anything on them yet, you know. Get outside and play in those things. Dad, they really hurt my feet. We're checking his shoes again, and they're too small. And he did. He went from a size 8 to a size 12 in about like 4-month time period. From the time it was May till he started school in the 8th grade. And he grew like 6 inches. He just went, Proom. And we knew something else was weird, too, because he'd say, Dad, I need to go to the store, you know. And his voice was making all these funny noises, funny sounds. And I said, what's wrong with you, boy? And his face went from this really cute little pudgy face, it just went, it just sucked in. And he got this really long, thin face that he's got today. And, you know, in fact, you look at his pictures. Our oldest boy is really funny because you look at his like high school, junior high school pictures, and you look at his baby pictures, you can't even tell they're the same kid. I mean, they just look totally different. What's funny about that is our younger son, he kind of did his little growing thing too, just didn't grow as much. And his school pictures, like from 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, they all look alike. It's so funny. I mean, it's like this kid has not changed, okay? And today he's still got this little bitty baby face, and everybody thinks he's 12 years old. Poor guy, he's 26 years old, but everybody thinks he's this little kid. But even he grew like 4 inches in just about 6 months' time and just shot up. And they changed so much. Well, that's what growth is. Growth is change. If somebody were to look at you today and say, you know, I wonder if they've grown much in the last 10 years as a Christian, could they spot a change? Could they look at your life and say, you know, they're different than they used to be? Wow, they have grown and matured so much. And I'm not talking about change this way, physically, okay? That one's pretty obvious. That's a dead giveaway. But if they spent time with you and talked with you, would they see a change? Would they see a change in you? Change can and should be good. We know about crop rotation. You know, farmers move their crops around, right? Why do they do that? Because they know if you plant green beans here just year after year after year, they won't flourish as much. And so they'll put the green beans here one year, move them over here, and then plant the green beans, move the corn around here, and then the onions over here. And I don't know what all farmers grow, but whatever they're growing, they use that crop rotation because that change is good. But folks, the sad truth is that some of you haven't grown in years. And it's time for a change. It's time for a change. Change can and should be good. Secondly, you must decide to start growing now. You need to start deciding to grow now. It's not what you're going to do, but it's what you're doing now that counts. Napoleon Hill said that. Why grow? Just some things here you might want to jot on your outline. Spiritual growth is not an automatic process. Now, physical growth may be automatic, but spiritual growth is not an automatic process, folks. It takes work, okay? Secondly, it's our responsibility to grow before God and to mature. The whole book of James is written so that we would grow spiritually. In fact, if you wanted a theme for the book of James, it would be mature. Grow up. Quit acting like the baby Christian that you were years ago, and now be mature and grow up and quit doing the things that you used to do. And your growth determines the growth of those around you. Again, kind of this ties in so much with the video series we're watching in Sunday school right now. You know, you can't get water from a well that has no water, right? You know, if the well doesn't have water, you can't get anything out of it. And you can't give what you don't have, okay? If I go up to Mark and I say, Mark, can I borrow $1 million? With all of the joy and the desire to give me $1 million, Mark can't give me $1 million if he doesn't have $1 million, right? So, Mark, can I just borrow $10 from you? Oh, no. We'll talk about that later, all right? But, you know, you can't influence somebody for Christ if you don't have Christ. And you can't take somebody past where you're at spiritually if you're not there spiritually. If you're a 3 spiritually, you can't take somebody to a 7. You just can't do it. If you're a 7, you can't take them to a 9 or a 10. And if you're weak spiritually, how are you going to, talking about training our kids this morning in Sunday school, how are you going to train your kids if you don't, and when they come to you with the basic questions of the Bible and you can't even answer them? Mom, Dad, who were Adam and Eve? Oh, gosh, I don't know. Better call the preacher about that one. We're going to have him come over and teach the kids. You got to at least know the basics, right? You can't give what you don't have. Number 3 is this: you must have a teachable spirit. You have to have a teachable spirit. When we were pastoring in Arkansas, we had a lady in the church, great family, by the way, great family, great husband, great wife, loved the Lord, studied the Scriptures, and asked her to take one of my Sunday school classes after they'd been in the church about 6 months, and I said, would you like to teach the kids? She said, oh, I'd love to teach the kids. She said, I've got some material that I've had for a while, and I'll bring it and I'll teach the kids. And so kind of like what we do in a lot of our classes, we put somebody in there with her, kind of see how she would do and see if she needed help that first Sunday. And no exaggeration, she brought one of those, you remember those really old slide projectors where, they would tell the story, and it said something like, now this was about year 92, okay, so there were things like VCRs and DVDs and things like that, okay. That stuff was already out, and she brought one of those old slide projectors, and she put in a little tape, and it said, this is the story of Adam and Eve. Bong, click, and she turned it, and this is Adam and Eve in the garden. Bong, and clicked it, and our kids were like, what is this bong thing going on? They've been watching videos for years, this is continual. It's kind of like the old 8-tracks, stop in the middle, bong, and you keep on going. And so I talked to her, and I said, that's really good material. This is great stuff, but, they've got these new things out called videos. She said, yeah, I just don't get those. And I said, well, they're not too complicated. You push it in the little machine, and it actually eats it and grabs it for you. And then when you're done, it spits it back out. It's kind of cool. And she's like, yeah, that's pretty complicated. I don't know. I just don't like that stuff. And I'm not really keen on learning new things. And so I'm bringing my flannel graph next week. And I said, it's and here we are trying to start new things and new programs and keep people kind of on the cutting edge type of stuff here. And she just didn't want to do that. She learned what she learned. She got out of Bible college. They taught her how to do flannel graph and pong little stories, and that's where she was stuck at. That was all she was ever going to do. John Wooden, the great basketball coach at the University of California, Los Angeles, said, it's what you learn after you know it all that counts. Let me say that again. It's what you learn after you know it all that really counts. And I'm sure John Wooden had some great basketball players come through that program at UCLA. I know that he did. And I'm sure he had some guys come in and said, I've been playing basketball for years. You really can't teach me anything. And I bet he had some fun with them and really teaching them how to play the game of basketball. John Maxwell says, the day you become an answer man is the day that you cease to grow. And somebody once said the greatest obstacle to discovery is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. See, about the time you think you've got life figured out and you already know all the answers and nobody can teach you anything else, you're in trouble. And by the way, most of us fall in that trap when we hit about 14, right? About age 14, we go, yeah, I've kind of learned it all. My parents, they're old fogies, they don't know anything. I've got this figured out, and I'm just going to get a job, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to make all this money, and life will just fall into my lap. And sadly, it's about 30, they realize it doesn't happen that way, right? Number 4 is this, and I think this is one of the key ones. Focus on self-development, not on self-fulfillment. You see, if Timothy lived his life just for Timothy, he wasn't going to accomplish anything. In fact, I think one of the biggest detriments to Christianity, really, is this whole thing that we live to get more stuff, right? We live to gain. We live to get. We live to better our lives in one way, shape, or another. Okay? And, this kind of gets back to motives here. Why do you do what you do? Is it for self or is it for others? Does God leave us here to get more things and have bigger houses or drive nicer cars? No, He leaves us here to minister to others. Okay? That's the whole purpose of the Christian life. Jesus Christ didn't come to get a whole bunch of stuff and to build set up a kingdom or build a big mansion or any of the kind of stuff, the disciples kind of thought He was going to do. Okay? What did Jesus say? In fact, He said, my kingdom's not even of this world. Okay? I don't even have a place to lay my head. That's not what's important. But He did come to seek and to save that which was lost. He came to die for others. You say, what's the difference? Well, self-fulfillment thinks of how things serve me. Self-development thinks of how something serves others. With self-fulfillment, feeling good is the product. Self-development, feeling good is the byproduct. Making others feel good is the product. How would your life look different if everything you did was for somebody else? I've shared this before, but Brenda and I have never had anybody come to us for counseling and say something like, preacher, I just don't seem to be helping enough people. Can you help me minister to more people? Can you show me how to help my husband a lot more? Can you help me to teach my wife or can you help me to teach me to help my wife around the house more and do more things for her? Because I just want to minister to her. No, most counseling goes like this. Well, I'm just not getting my needs met. And he's just not doing what he needs to do, and she never thinks of me. Okay? And I've done this exercise in this church. I like to do it when I go places. I've given you the little 3x5 card, and I always ask the little question, why did you get married? Why did you get married? And almost always the answer starts back, and the sentences read something like this. I got married so that I could have, right? And then you fill in the blank. I got married so that I could have, this is my favorite one, a soulmate. Okay. A soulmate. You know. And if I ask you to define that, most of you go, I don't really know, it's just a soulmate. You know, and that'd be your definition. And so you got yourself, or so that I could have a friend. Well, you poor, pathetic thing. You didn't have any friends till you got married. That's sad. I got married so to have someone to laugh with. Wow, you must have had a sad life, you know. And to get married just so someone would laugh with you, gosh, that's terrible. I got married so that, so I'd have money. I don't know what you got married for, and that didn't work out. You found out they didn't have any. They lied to you, okay? So, I don't know why you got married, okay? But almost always it's I got married so that I could have, I could get, and you see the problem with that whole statement? We did it to gain, to get, to have, for us, okay? Rarely does somebody write on there, not occasionally they do, but rarely does somebody write on there, I got married so that I could give my life, to share my life, to minister to this person. And probably by now, after several years of marriage, you've already realized that person needs a lot of ministering to. They need a lot of help, right? But, if you go into this thing for self-fulfillment, by now you probably figured out you're pretty disappointed, right? And self-development is what needs to be the focus in leadership. Number 5 is this: never stay satisfied with past accomplishments. I don't know who said this, but it said, if what you did yesterday still looks big to you, then you haven't done much today. Let me say that again. If what you did yesterday still looks big to you, then you haven't done much today. If I were to ask some of you what you've accomplished for Christ, you would take me back to your youth group days. You'd say, well, preacher, when I was a teenager, we used to go to camp, and we did this, and we used to go to this thing, and I did this, and I served, and I rode a bus, and I brought bus kids. And I'm going, whoa, time out. That was like how many years ago? 20, 30, 40 years ago? What are you doing right now for Jesus Christ? Used to have a guy in our church in California, and he'd say, well, we started that church across town. And then after about 3 or 4 years there, we started this one over there, and we started that one over there. And I was like, how long have you been in this church? I've been in this church 25 years. And I've always wanted to say, what ministry have you started here? And he'd always say, well, we started that church over there. We started that church over there. And after about 20, for the last 25 years, he just kind of sat and, I would say be content, but he wasn't content. He just sat and complained about other things that other people were doing that he wasn't doing. I think one of the most tragic stories in the Bible is the story of Noah. You say, wait a minute, Brother Jeff, Noah was this great, awesome dude. I mean, he built the boat. Have you not read your Bible, preacher? Yeah, I heard that story. But you know how old Noah was when he got off the boat? Noah was 601 years old when he got off the boat. Do you know how old Noah was when he died? 950 years old. The last 349 years of his life, nothing is written about Noah, except that he got drunk and that he failed and committed sin. And I'm thinking, did the guy not do anything after 350 years? I mean, God had just done this great miracle for him. What happened? And then you see nothing else about Noah. Never stay satisfied with past accomplishments. I hope the greatest accomplishment of my life occurs the day before I die, not 20 years before the day I die. I don't want people to say, yeah, Pastor Jeff, he pastored that church over in Lenexa. How many years ago was that? Like 20 years ago. Huh, yeah. He doesn't have much time left. What has he been doing since then? You ever hear from him? No. Find out anything about him? No. Just kind of faded off into oblivion. I hope that the day before I die, I win 12 people to Christ. I don't know. Just something that becomes my greatest accomplishment. I've read this story to you before, but I think it's just so telling of how we rest on past laurels so many times. And I'm borrowing this from one of Paul Harvey's books because I love Paul Harvey anyway. And my mother gave me this book when I was a kid, and this story has made an impression on me ever since. I'm just going to read this. He says, 37 years young, too young to be dying, and yet the symptoms of a terminal heart disease were unmistakably. She told friends that her life now hung by a thread which might snap at any moment. And so she went to bed, and she waited to die. But she did not die. Instead, she became an invalid, a fearful captive of the fatal symptoms that strangely refused to kill her. So many symptoms with but one source, psychoneurosis. In other words, it was all in her mind. This, then, is the anatomy of a hypochondriac. The peculiar illnesses began when she was about 17. Her wealthy, socially ambitious parents had plans for her, but yet she had her own plans, which included independence from her parents. While I do not mean to suggest that the young lady was playing sick, it must be noted that virtually all of her illnesses followed family arguments, as though sickness had become her subliminal defense against parental manipulation. At 33, she finally left home, got her own place to live, got happy. Her family frustrations gone, so she fled her psychosomatic swooning. This bliss lasted 3 years. For 3 years, she was an achiever, a woman of responsibility, boundless energy whose only aches and pains were legitimate ones. You, the investigator of her case history, must be alert at this point and must watch for the moment at which she lapsed into her former self. She was 36 when it happened. Palpitations, respiratory difficulty, sick at the sight of food. Within months, she was bedridden, her pulse frighteningly rapid. And there she stayed. On occasion, her condition grew suddenly worse, and the occasions were almost always predictable. Unwelcome visitors, routinely inspired headaches, chest pains, and gasping for breath. By now, apparently, her psychoneurosis had become a well-oiled problem-solving machine. She may even have understood it at one level or another, although outwardly she believed herself to be constantly at the brink of death. 37 years old, invalid, anxiously awaiting the dread moment her heart would drop out from under her. And one day it did. One day it did. She was 90. Her illness really was psychosomatic, you see. For 53 years, more than a half century, she lived in bed for nothing. True, her confinement accomplished certain things. It brought the people she wanted to her side as her sudden attacks drove away the unwanted. Her bed even proved a comfortable vantage point from which she could observe and administer the work of others. Yet the psychoneurosis which held her prisoner for most of her life had deeper roots still. Now go back with me. Remember those 3 years during which she was not plagued by imaginary illnesses? Remember those 3 years she spent alleviating the suffering of others? Most of that time at the Crimean War Front. And some of you now are with me. Her name, and a young woman who inspired many, many others to enter the nursing field, Florence Nightingale. As Paul Harvey would say, and now you know the rest of the story, right? 3 years of her life was about all she ever did anything and accomplished anything. All the rest of it, in fact, the last 53 years of life, laying in bed, just waiting to die, and really socially invalid. And for 3 years, she got her eyes off herself and all of her problems and all of her relationship issues and focused on others and accomplished more in those 3 years, really changed the entire medical field that we know today, and nurses and RNs and all that stuff that we have. But just for 3 years. And then fell back into thinking of herself. You know, some people look at Florence Nightingale and say, wow, what an accomplishment. What a great, amazing woman. Yeah, but what about, that was 53 years ago. What did she do after that? And the answer would be nothing. Number 6 is this: be a continual learner. There's a saying in the business world that says, to keep up, I can't let up. Some of you may have heard that. But some of you let up years ago. God mistreated you, you feel. Something happened in your life that just wasn't fair, and so you kind of quit on God. Some of you won't like this, but I'm just going to challenge you that if you're going to keep learning, you're going to have to do something weird, like turn off the TV once in a while. Pick up a book. Get off Facebook. You're probably not learning anything really healthy and strong in Facebook anyway, okay? Even the internet, okay, I guess you could learn a lot on the internet because everything on the internet is true. So you can learn a lot there, all right? We know that. You may have to spend some time alone, get by yourself, okay? But you've got to feed yourself. Don't expect the church or the preacher to do it all. You've got to feed yourself. Study something, okay? Learn more. I told you about a pastor friend of mine who I played Trivial Pursuit with him one night. And they just paired a bunch of us preachers up together, and I was on his team, and they would ask these questions, and he was answering every question. And finally, about halfway through the game, and we were killing everybody, except the sports questions. I knew those. He couldn't get any of them, but I was nailing the sports questions, you know. And we got to the end of the game. Finally, somebody said after about 3 games and winning 3 in a row, they're like, "You want to trade teams?" I'm going, "No, I don't want to trade teams. This guy's carrying me." So, but after about 3 games, us winning, finally somebody said, "How in the world did you learn so much stuff? All this nonsensical stuff, you know all this." He said, "Every night before I go to bed, I read 10 pages of the Encyclopedia Britannica." He said, "Now, I don't catch most of it." He said, "But a lot of it sticks. A lot of it just, you hear something and you go, wow, that's weird, that's unique, I've never learned that before," and then it just sticks in there. And the stuff he had learned, he was amazing. He kind of was an walking encyclopedia. But he never quit studying and learning. Now, he studied the Word of God, too. The guy was amazing there, too, but he took it in. Number 7 is this: be willing to pay the price for growth and change. Anytime you change, there's a price to be paid. When I went off to Bible college and moved 1,700 miles away to go to Bible college, there were some sacrifices that were made. It cost me something. In ministry, if you decide to minister to anyone, it may cost you some dreams and some plans. Marriage includes sacrifices if it's going to be a successful marriage. Our first child cost us something. Okay, in fact, especially it cost us when we got a letter from the insurance company about 3 weeks after he was born that said, "We're sorry, we've gone bankrupt. You will get to pay the hospital all the money that you owe them." Okay, that was kind of fun early in our marriage. Our first child cost us a ton. Okay, and then a second child came along, and that cost a little bit more. And we've learned as kids get older, they cost more and more all the time. When we decided to put them in a Christian school in Arkansas, that really cost us. In fact, we had done our research, we'd planned out our budget, we lined it all out, and said, okay, if we really, really work hard and we really, really skimp and save, I think we can probably put them in this Christian school. The day we went down to enroll them in the school, and at that time they were giving ministers a 50% discount. So we thought we can pull this off, and 2 years later we'll put our second one in and we can do this. And the day we went down to enroll them, they said, "Oh, by the way, our policy has changed. So we don't give any discounts anymore in any way, shape, or form." And immediately the tuition doubled. And I remember looking at the lady and I said, "Can you put everything on hold for about 24 hours? I said, "Because I don't know if we can pull this off." I said, "We're going to have to go home. We're going to pray about this. We're going to have to restructure. We're going to see what in the world happens." And I called Brendan and I said, "We got a real serious problem here." And we'd been planning this since when our oldest boy was in 2nd grade. And now he was in 7th grade. And we'd budgeted and planned and prepared. And I called her. I said, "I don't know." I said, "What do you think we ought to do?" And we said, "Well, we need to pray about it first." So we prayed about it. And we felt that this is where God wanted our boys. And so we said, well, we thought we were going to bite the bullet. Now we're going to eat the whole gun, I guess, because that's the only way we're going to get this done. And we did, and we got them in there. Tell me, there were some sacrifices that had to be made. Listen, change will always cost us. Put just real quick there, I'll fly through them here, some little bullet points there. There's always a price tag to growth. Discipline, you have to change some habits. You're just going to have to. It's going to be required. Risk. Somebody once said you can't steal second with your foot on first, right? I told you this story, and I'm going to tell it again just because it's one of my favorite stories. But when I coached in 13-year-old baseball, Little League baseball, we had a kid on our team that was named Casey McCarty. And I loved Casey because Casey was one of the hardest working kids I ever had on my team. But he was also the slowest kid in the entire city. Okay? And what you don't know about 13-year-old baseball is but in Arkansas, in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where our boys we were growing up, raising the boys and everything, went from 12-year-old baseball playing 60-foot bases, okay? And when you moved to 13-year-old baseball, you immediately went to 90-foot bases, okay? Now, that's a huge jump for the kids. In other words, they were playing the same distance that the pros were playing, okay? In fact, I put together my team, and I looked to see how many kids can throw the ball from third base to first base, and I had a whole team of second basemen, okay? I had one kid who could throw the ball from third to first, and I said, great, you're my third baseman. I only had one other kid who could throw it from shortstop to first. I said, great, you're my shortstop, you know? Can you catch a ground ball? No, but you can throw it. If you do knock it and hits you and knocks you in the face and it falls in front of you, you can at least pick it up and throw it out, okay? Guys from the outfield could never throw the ball home. So I believe if I could just have a really fast team and just every time we had a chance just to try to steal the next base or the next base or the next base, we'd have a good team. And so, in fact, we stole 18 bases in the first 3 games. We averaged 6 stolen bases a game. I was going, this is a blast. We were winning every game. And so, but poor Casey was on my team. I drafted Casey because he was a catcher, okay? And he could throw the ball pretty hard to second base, but he was slower and all get out. And he'd hit that ball and it'd hit the grass infield, and they'd throw him out by a mile. But every once in a while, he'd nail the ball pretty good. And I remember when Casey hit his first double. And Casey hit this double. That's a lot. That's 180 feet, okay? For a 13-year-old kid, that's a big accomplishment. He hit this ball in the gap, and he ran it first, and he's chugging for second. And he got second base, and he got a double. He's all pumped. He's got his arms. I said, way to go, Casey. I'm coaching third base. And so I already knew, because I pretty much had an unwritten rule, okay, in the back of my mind. If anybody gets a base hit and there's a kid on second, he's scoring, okay? That was just the rule, okay, on my team because everybody's fast. Kind of forgot about Casey. But, you know, everybody else is fast. And besides, there's not very many 13-year-old kids that can throw the ball all the way from left field all the way to home plate and get the kid out. It takes 3 miracles. One, he's got to stop the ball. Number 2, he's got to throw the ball on line. The third miracle is the other kid's got to catch it. Okay? That just didn't happen very often in 13-year-old baseball, okay, at pro distances. So Casey's on second base, and I told Casey, I said, Casey, if he gets a base hit, you're scoring. Casey's like, I can't score, Coach. I'm too slow. I said, Casey, if he gets a base hit, you're going to score. Coach, I can't score. I'm too slow. Next pitch. Whack. Kid smacks it to center field, okay? I said, come on, Casey. I'm waving him in. Man, come on, Casey. You can do it, Casey. Come on, Casey. Casey's lumbering around that third base, you know, and he's shaking his head the whole way. I'm going to get killed. I'm going to get killed. He's going to throw me out. 3 miracles happened. The center fielder stopped the ball. He came up through a perfect strike to home plate. Catcher caught the ball, third miracle. And Casey's about halfway down the line. That catcher's just waiting for him. Like, would you get here? You know, would you hurry up and get here? He tagged him out, and Casey was thrown out by a mile. Okay, Casey gets back to the bench. I knew it. I told you I was going to kill you. I can't believe you sent me. That's the stupidest thing, Coach. I can't believe you sent me. I said, Casey, before this year's up, you're going to score. Coach, I can't score. I'm too slow. I can't slow. A couple games later, Casey whack, smacks the ball, gets a double. Hey, I got a double. Casey and I already knew what was going to happen. Casey's praying on second base. I hope this kid doesn't get a hit because I know what Coach is going to do. He's going to send me home. Sure enough, next kid behind him smacks the ball out in outfield. Here we go again. Come on, Casey. You can do it, Casey. Come on. Casey chugging away, chugging. The 3 miracles did not happen. Okay? I don't know what happened in the outfield. I was just looking at Casey praying all the way, Lord, please, get this kid home, you know. And I don't know what happened, but the throw was offline or something, and Casey scored. And I'm going to tell you right now, in about 5 seconds, Casey went from I can't do anything to a kid who said, man, if I can score from second base, anybody can score from second base. And Casey thought he was the world's greatest hero and he could accomplish anything in life. You know why? Because he took a risk. And he said, I can do this. I can do it. And he didn't have a choice. I was putting the risk in him, but he scores. And you know, he's high-fiving everybody in the dugout. He hadn't scored all year. You know, it was amazing. I made it. Everybody, way to go, Casey. They're hugging him, you know. He thought he just won the World Series. We did win every game but one that year, which was kind of fun. But, you know, a lot of it was just stuff like that, you know. And he took that risk. And he would have never scored had he never just gone for it and done it. You know, you got to be willing to change. We've already talked about that, so I'll move on. Loneliness. Sometimes you're going to be secluded. Not everyone has the same desire to grow as you will. Not everybody's going to understand your commitment. It's going to take time. You'll have to sacrifice your time to help others. You're going to be misunderstood. People will question your motives, your methods, misunderstand why you do some things. Growth in our marriage, people understood. You know, we do things in our marriage that people don't understand. You guys always hang out together. Yeah, we do. That's just kind of what we do, okay? I got 2 days off. I got Friday off and Monday this week. You know what we're doing? We're hanging out together. Today we're going to leave. We're going to go down and see our son. You go down and see him all the time. Yeah, that's right. That's what we do, okay? And I don't expect you to understand. Really don't care if you understand. That's just what we do in our marriage, and it works, all right? So that's what we're going to do. You're going to be understand when you do things for other people. Teddy Roosevelt said this. He said, there has not yet been a person in our history who has led a life of ease whose name is worth remembering. I love that. You think of all the names you know. George Washington, Abraham Lincoln. Oh, yeah, poor Abe just sat there in the White House, had a life of ease. Yeah, right. You know, I mean, anybody who's ever had it tough, had it difficult, Those are the people we remember. Number 8 is this. You're saying, he's never going to get this message finished. Yeah, I will. Hang on with me. Develop a system to apply what you've learned. Just put together something. Jim Rohn said, don't let your learning lead to knowledge. Let your learning lead to action. Do something with the things you learn. Develop a filing system. Use the things that you learn quickly. Apply them quickly. If you hear a new word, say that word. Use that word like 5 or 6 times in a day. Our youngest son loves to do this. He's always throwing new words at me I've never heard before. What can I do with what I've learned? Who can I influence with this? Number 9, you must be willing to be uncomfortable. Brother Jeff, didn't God save us so that we'd be comfortable and live this life of ease? No, not at all. Okay, you'll never choose to grow if you're not willing to be uncomfortable. Okay, something in human nature. I want to read you this quote. It says, "Something in human nature tempts us to stay where we're comfortable. We try to find a plateau, a resting place where we have comfortable stress and adequate finances, where we have comfortable associations with people without the intimidation of meeting new people and entering new situations. Of course, all of us need to plateau for a time, but then we climb and we plateau for a simulation. But once we've assimilated and what we've learned, we climb again." And I want you to catch this last part. He says, "It's unfortunate that when we've done our last climb, when we have made our last climb, we are old. And it doesn't matter whether we are 40 or 80. And isn't that true? Well, I've gotten right here. I'm pretty happy now. And at that point, you start becoming old. Ronald E. Osborne said, "Unless you try to do something beyond what you've already mastered, you will never grow." And our prayer should always be, "Lord, please don't let me die until I'm done living." Number 10 is this: develop a strategy for growth. You say, what do you mean by that? One thing, put yourself around people who are growing. Okay? And that's what discipleship's all about. That's what the disciples did. Jesus didn't say, "All right, you guys, come here. I'm going to send you in the world. Now go. Y'all get out here and go do it." All right? No, Jesus said, "You guys hang around me. Stick around for about 3.5 years here. We're going to get this thing done. I'm going to train you. I'm going to teach you. I'm going to show you how to do all this stuff. And then we'll go. Okay? Then you can go out and do your thing. All right? But for now, just stick close. Get around those that are ahead of you. Do things that still challenge you. Keep your focus forward, not back." Paul said, "Forgetting those things which are behind." Moving forward, pressing forth. Get out of your comfort zone. I like this one. Wake up excited about today's challenges. When was the last time you woke up excited? Some of you are going, when was the last time the alarm went off at 4:30, 5:30, 6:30, 7:30, whatever it might be for you, okay, and it went off and you smacked it and you went, "Yes, I get to go do it again. This is going to rock. I can't wait to get to work. I can't wait for we got this mess of a project at work. I can't wait to get there and tackle that thing." Hey, you don't do that. You hit that thing and you go, "Oh, my goodness gracious, Lord, give me mercy already. I'm not even out of bed, and I've got to do this project. Now, I don't want to face those people and those bosses." And, that's the way we approach most days. When was the last day you really woke up excited about the challenges of today? Develop relationships with growing people. One last thing, Maxwell said, "It's not always comfortable, but always rewarding to associate with people larger than yourself." And I gave you a little thing here that I would like to see become your mantra. Emerson and Thoreau used to always ask themselves this question. Whenever they would meet, they would ask each other this question: "And what has become clearer to you since we last met?" If I were to go around this room this morning and ask you, what has become more clearer to you this week than it was last week when we met? What do you know more about now? What have you learned? Where have you grown? What has God taught you out of His Word now that you didn't have last week? I wonder what some of you would say. "Oh, preacher, I don't know. Gosh, that's weird. What a dumb question. I don't even understand the question. Could you repeat the question, preacher? I was a little confused." Kind of weird language, I know. Although, if you were to diagram this thing, everything's in the wrong spot. But, and what has become clearer to you since we last met? Isn't that neat? I would challenge you, I'm going to challenge you in the weeks that lie ahead that periodically you walk up to somebody, and you can rephrase it to where it makes sense for you, okay? But, I'm going to challenge Jeremiah to go around and start asking the men of the church, "Hey, Tim, what'd you learn this week? Hey, Troy, what did God teach you this week that you didn't know before? What's clear now? Hey, Mark, what's clearer this week than it was last week out of God's Word?" You ladies, until they turn around to Bernadette and say, hey, Bernadette, what did you learn this week that you haven't learned yet? in the youth group, the teens are sitting around and go, what did you learn this week that you didn't know before? What did you get out of God's Word this week when you were reading it? Because you were reading it, right? Okay, yeah, I thought so you were. Okay, so what did you learn this week? So that's what all this whole thing of leadership and teamwork is all about. Let me ask you to bow your heads with me this morning.